We're tilling it like it is, where research meets the county biz. From leadership to market trends, to how to talk to bankers and make new friends. Yeah, we're tilling it like it is, bringing knowledge through the rifts. If it helps your farm, your school, or your kids, you'll hear it here, no politics. We're just telling it like it is.
Hello and welcome to Telling It Like It Is, UGA Extension in Southeast District, source for local, unbiased, research-based information about Georgia's #1 industry, agriculture. As always, your hosts for today's episode are myself, Blake Carter, the Lawrence County Ag and Natural Resources Agent, and Savannah Tanner, the Emmanuel County Agriculture and Natural Resources Agent. Today is going to be a little bit different. Normally, we try to stay together, and I guess this is the last time we've been together. It's been a couple of weeks, but today's episode, Savannah Tanner is going to kind of lead most of the discussion with our guest. We have Scout Carter from Jenkins County Extension Office coming in and talking. He's a fan favorite this time of year. We've had him on before, and actually is one of the most listened to podcast episodes we've had, and it's on deer plots. And we decided we wanted to go back to the basics and have him on one more time to talk some more. It's been a couple years from the food plot side, so as we're getting that time of year and we're getting ready to get our bows ready, get our rifles ready to go for the deer and the turkey seasons, he's going to provide a little bit of insight for us going into the fall. So I wanted to start by putting in a plug for the Outstanding Farmers of America. They have a award program called the Outstanding Young Farmer of America, and each state has an opportunity to nominate someone, and Georgia's process is pretty simple. We work with the county agents here in the state, and we nominate local young farmers in our communities under the age of 40, and they compete through the state for a state winner, and we also send those applications to the national level. I've been fortunate enough to have a couple state winners, but also one national winner and one of the finalists of the top 12. And I cannot be more proud of those guys and being a part of that journey. But if you know someone or are a farmer under the age of 40 and think this would be something that you would like to pursue, because let me tell you, it is something that is incredible. You get to meet some incredible people. I would highly recommend you getting with your local county agents, county extension agents, and get your nominations in. I believe the deadline for that is in September or to the end of August. So it's definitely coming up in the next couple of weeks. So I know everything's going on with harvest and everything like that, but just giving you a plug out there in case someone is interested. I think it's a great competition. I also want to go ahead and say on that same line, the Georgia Farmer of the Year competition nominations are usually due in December, but it's never too early to start kind of thinking through that, seeing if there might be someone in your community that you would like to nominate or think that the county agent could nominate. Please get with your local county extension office and talk with them about potential applicants there. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Savannah, and she's going to talk through hunting and deer plots with Scout Carter. So, Savannah, over to you.
It is one of your hosts, Savannah, and Blake will join us at a later time. And also, we have a special guest, Scout Carter, who is the Jenkins County Ag and Natural Resources Agent with us today. Scout's background is in wildlife and hunting management, things like that, which, no, it's not getting cooler, but I'm kind of getting excited because, we're starting to order things like bird shot for dove shoots and buckshot for deer season. And last week we actually turned some puppies out to train with some old dogs, and they've been doing great the last couple of nights. So we're super excited about that. But really, yes, it's early. Yes, it's still hot. Yes, I still want to be on the boat or at the beach. But really now is the time to start thinking about some deer management going into the fall. So Scout, if you will, talk to us a little bit about site selection and where should we be planning our food plots or our deer stands or things like that.
So a lot of people look at site selection as what is available, what's cleared, what can I plant. And sometimes that can be good, like your fire breaks, your loading docks, some strips in between pines. Sometimes between your planted pines and your hardwoods, you have a strip. But all that's fine and dandy. But sometimes strategically, while you're hunting the food plot, you're not going to have a great wind, or you're not going to have access in and out to that food plot without spooking deer. And you might not, okay, maybe you can get in clean, but once they're feeding in that food plot at night, that's the goal, right? To attract them. You got to be able to get out of that stand without bumping deer. Now you can still shoot deer, but will your big buck be attracted there? So that's some things we think about on site selection. Is not only is it available ground, but is it huntably accessible in a strategic manner. So sometimes, when you thinning pines at year, 18, 20, 21, whatever your site selection index is going to put you at, sometimes you can get these loggers to come in third row or fourth row, and that can create a lot of options on placing food plots and planted pines. If you've clear cut and you're starting fresh, that's an easy way to kind of strategically look at your main wind direction during the winter. A lot of our cold fronts, so we're going to have a northwest wind blowing. So, that's something to think about. But also, we'll get a south or an east wind, mainly more east than south. So, you got to have stands and locations on these food plots. Soil productivity is also a factor that you got to look at. But overall, for just getting a kind of a huntable kill plot, I'm assuming we're talking about 1 acre food plots that we're hunting over in the fall with the goal of killing some deer and hopefully a big deer. There's a lot to think about, but I think the one thing that needs to be on your mind is access in and out, and if you can hunt it on some of our main wind directions.
So without scaring the deer away, more or less, getting in and out there.
A lot of people will have a food plot and they'll place the stand in the middle of it or kind of off the back side, but they're bumping the deer when they get out of the stand.
That's interesting. I had never really thought about that of where you're going to be, actually placing it other than away from houses, and certainly safety should be a concern too. Other deer stands, other hunters, things like that. But so once we have selected the site that is not only huntable, strategically huntable, but also safe, what do we need to be doing to prepare that site?
So, seed to soil contact, that is the number one thing you need to keep in your mind when you're preparing your spot. A lot of people will spray, let's say we're planting in middle of September or towards the end of September. If we move our timeline back, you probably at least need to spray that site once with glyphosate. If you're doing it with a backpack sprayer, generally that's going to be 1.5 ounces, 2.5 ounces per gallon of water. If we're going with, a boom sprayer, you'll probably be running 15 to 20 gallons of water per acre. And, that'll get you probably a quart to 2 quart, depending on what glyphosate product you're using. But always read the label and check, because it'll guide you better than just throwing out a random number depending on your product. But you at least probably want to get 1 spray in. Some people like to get 2 sprays in, spray it, a month out, and then come back again and spray again, whatever escaped. And then you can come in and hair up. A lot of people hair. If you got a tiller, you can till, and then you can plant. But you want to always be mindful of rainfall and when it's going to rain. And that time of the year, we're always thin on rain.
So one of the questions that I end up with a lot is about no-till. And so I think no-till is a good option sometimes, but not when we start talking about some mixes. Can you talk a little bit about no-tilling?
Yeah, a lot of people, that is the hype right now, and it's good. But when you get into your mixes, some of these seeds are placed at different depths, and you still might get some germination, but you won't get the ideal of what you're going for. One thing I like to do, I've hopped on the no-till train. I'm a big fan of, I'll come in 2 to 3 weeks before I plan to plant, or would like to plant, depending on the rainfall, and I'll spray, and then I'll come in and broadcast my seed over the top, and then I'll mow my seed, or I won't mow my seed, but I'll mow the existing dead vegetation over my seed, and it'll help. We're thin on moisture that time of the year. It'll help preserve some moisture. It gives you a good crop.
You're essentially doing a backwards cover crop.
Basically.
Then, yeah.
And it works good, especially some of these years, which has been more so recently that we've been dry.
Right.
And that's worked good. But, seed to soil contact is the main thing. And I'll top dress my clovers and my brassicas after I've mowed, and that's assuming I'm getting a rain.
So as more of a forage, which it honestly, forages and wildlife food plots are very similar. They're essentially the same crops in a different aspect, different amounts of input. But from a forage standpoint, both clover and brassicas require a little more in-depth soil analysis and fertilizer content. So talk a little bit about what we need to be doing as far as soil goes.
Yeah. The hardest thing about planting a food plot is getting somebody to pull a soil sample. It's the best money you can spend. You're going to put a lot of time and effort out and a lot of money, and a lot of people will skip this step, but it will solve a lot of your problems if you pull a soil sample and you apply lime. Right now, it's kind of like you're in the bar in Athens. It's closing time. The bar is probably actually already, it's 2:10 and it closed at 2. They put closing time on. They're getting everybody out. Like, we're right here. Like, you can still, if closing time's playing, you can still lime, but you're not going to see the full benefit of it this year. I mean, you'll get some benefit, but it is important to get that lime out, probably in the spring or the summer, but even the previous winter, at the end of the deer season, pull your soil samples, look at your liming requirements, because a lot of the times, if it's a bigger food plot, some of your warehouses, they'll lime for you, but you might have to coordinate while they're liming a farmer in the area, and then they'll run by your place. You got to have good access to your plots if you want them to do it. If not, you might have to tote a bunch of bags in on a UTV or a side-by-side and spread it yourself. But as far as soil sampling, you want to be around a 6.2 or a 6.5, like Savannah was talking about. For a lot of your clovers and brassicas, they're a little more picky. We do have some seeds that are a little more lower pH friendly we can talk about in a little bit. But as far as soil sampling, generally, if it's not already, in its highest and best use, it might not be the best soil. And we're in Georgia, so we don't necessarily have the highest pH anyways.
Especially if it's in pine stands.
Mm-hmm.
It's not uncommon to see a 4.5 pH. And if these things are requiring a 6.5 in some situations, we kind of have let's not even get started talking about alfalfa.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'd be a really good opportunity to go ahead and pull one just to have going forward. But as you alluded to, let's talk a little bit about some of those maybe lower input crops that we can use, and then we'll kind of go into just your standard crops.
Yeah, so if we're looking at some low pH options, we got cereal rye, crimson, and red clover even can handle some lower pHs. Hairy vetch is an option. And then in the summer you can go with buckwheat and lab. They're real good for low pH, especially buckwheat. It's really known as a soil builder. And the deer, some people say the deer don't like it, but I've had a lot of success with it personally, and I've had some friends with some success in it.
What about iron clay peas? Are they a little bit lower input?
That's another one. Yeah, they do. They handle a little bit lower of a pH, and also they can hold up the browsing pressure as well.
Well, so also I do want to point out while we're talking about some more of our legume type options that you're going to want to make sure, especially if you plant a mix, that you're going to be getting inoculants that are the correct inoculant, the correct bacterium for the different legumes that you are planting. So, for instance, if you were planting iron clay peas, and let's just take soybeans, for example, they may not be the same inoculant. So that may be something to think about going forward. We don't think about that a lot in food plots, but a lot of times I hear people that aren't very successful in their legumes in food plots, and that could certainly be one of the issues.
Mm-hmm. Yes, a lot of them will come pre-inoculated now, but not all of them.
That's right.
And people, that'll set yourself up for failure as well.
What about just your generalized, more common food plots? Oats, ryegrass, maybe not ryegrass, and in wild food plots, but talk a little bit about some of those that we are using pretty standardly.
So in the fall, it's to me, I always think it's pretty easy to get a fall food plot established, assuming you've got your soil right. But in the fall, we're generally looking at a mix of like rye, wheat, and oats. A lot of places will have a package 4, 5-way, 6-way mix, and those three will be in it. Some clover and some turnip, maybe some Austrian winter peas. But the ratios that are in the mixes are generally not correct. So I'll supplement mine on my own. I personally like to get a 3 or 4-way mix and then add. I like a clover trio that's made by Pennington. It gives you crimson, it gives you red clover, and arrow leaf clover. So it can feed all the way through May or June typically. And then by then, a lot of the times there's enough forage growing in the summer, you're really not having to worry about much. But clover options, you got crimson, you got red, you got arrowleaf. As far as white clovers, you got ladino and durana, and they're more of a perennial that people will try to establish. Not a lot of people go with perennials overall, but they can be beneficial to have. And your turkeys really like the clovers in the spring. They can hammer some crimson if it comes up good.
Well, and one of the things that people hit on a lot in the deer industry is protein. And so from what I know as a ruminant nutritionist, you want that protein for deer in the spring because that's when they're going to be shedding horns and going to start regrowing horns for the following year. And so your things like your crimson clover, that's going to be perfect for them going into April and May. Sure, they're going to get some grazing from it now, but they're also going to be getting that crimson clover is going to last well on into April and May for you too, assuming it's not overgrazed. But we want to talk about protein in this and protein in that, but you guys should really be thanking your farmers because they're the ones providing the protein in the fall and in the spring and the summer.
Yeah, they are. They do a lot of feeding of deer for sure.
So things like peanuts and soybeans, all of that from a plant standpoint offers a pretty good amount of protein that's going to help with some of that antler management too.
Mm-hmm. And then the last thing people plant that we've touched on a little bit is brassicas. You got turnips and kale and rape and radishes, and there's a lot of different varieties out there, and that can be a whole topic in of itself. But for the most part, as long as you put some turnips or radishes, sometimes deer, it seems like it might take them a year or two to kind of get used to eating them.
Yeah, so in my experience with cows, those sugars have to hit just right. And so during that growing point of that brassica, eventually the sugars will hit into the upper canopy of that plant, and that's when cows really like it. But you have to train them to eat it for sure, just like deer.
Then they'll start eating on it during the summer once they get used to it. You know, some of your summer mixes will even throw some in there. But yeah, and another thing that, you know, we can talk about when we're choosing seed and we're selecting seed and we're making mixes is, you know, on the bag there's a germination rate, and then there's usually a pure live seed amount that's listed. And when we're looking at trying to figure out how much per acre to plant, those are two critical numbers that need to go into, you know, the decision making process, because germination rates are generally going to be, you know, 85 to 95%. And your pure live seed, especially for some of your clovers and legumes, especially if they're pre-inoculated, it can be 30 to 50% of the amount that's in that bag. So you're short selling yourself if you don't pay attention to those rates when you're buying seed.
For sure. So let's talk a little bit. So we've picked the spot. We have planted the spot, and now we're getting ready to really hone in on hunting. We really want to entice them to come. So how do we feed or manage them during the season?
Yeah, you know, you want to look at fertilization as well, as far as when we're feeding them from a food standpoint. That can really help your food plots. And you can put half of it out at planting, half your nitrogen out at planting, and you can later in December, January, you can do the other half then based off what your soil test is calling for, and your P and K can go out at planting as well. But as far as outside of the food plot, if you're wanting to look at some feeding options, corn is something that a lot of people go with. And that can be a heavily debated topic. You know, is that going to help you or hurt you as far as a big buck standpoint? Now, those, you know, they're going to come to it every day, it seems like. And I personally prefer, if I'm going to use corn at a spot, I prefer cob corn, but then you have to go out there more often, and you can leave scent. So you have to be strategic with that. But also protein feed. Some people will feed all, you know, a lot of people feed in the summer, but some will follow into the fall with it as well.
I get tickled. There's a guy that hunts around our house, and he's actually a salesman for one of the deer feeds, and he pushes it pretty hard, and I just get tickled because, you know, I'm in the cattle industry, and it's the cost of the feed is wild. Let's just be honest, and it's basically peanut hulls, whole peanuts, and cottonseed. And so I get tickled at that because that's what we feed cows every day. But for certain, I mean, it makes sense because we're feeding that for both energy potential and protein. So when you're talking about your bucks, or even maybe some of your does going into having kids, or fawns going into the springs, not a bad idea.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of a rising tide. The healthier your deer herd is, the better it can withstand some stress. And, you know, we don't get a lot of winter stress around here. So, you know, generally our deer are usually pretty healthy overall. But, you know, the quality of protein available, you know, the antlers will reflect that at times.
So you mentioned a healthy deer herd. So when we're going into season, how should we look at managing that deer herd from a cull situation? So in my experience, now I don't have research to back this up, but in my experience, the more animals you kill, whether that's little bucks, whether that's does, if you give it 4 or 5 years, you're going to end up getting more bucks because you're killing basically the competition. Because, you know, little bucks are going to try to rut just like a big buck is going to. So talk a little bit more about just managing that herd from that standpoint.
Yeah, herd balancing, that's another topic you could talk about for hours, and there's as many opinions as you can imagine on it. But generally speaking, the number to does to bucks you're wanting to have is probably 1 to 1 or 2 to 1. But realistically, we have a pretty skewed doe population. So realistically, are we going to get there? That's tough, but you do want to shoot a lot of your does. And then there's a whole topic about which does to shoot. But generally speaking, if you're shooting does during the season, Georgia's made it easier with the doe weekend. At least last year, I haven't checked if it's going into effect this year as well. And we got 10 doe tags and 2 buck tags. And from a meat perspective, you do have to let your bucks go if you want them to grow. I mean, that's simple, but you do in certain populations have an instance where you might have too many bucks in a certain age class, and there's topics and people that debate that on if you need to take some of those bucks out as well. I personally, I generally will let most bucks go. When I'll start considering shooting a buck, is if they're 2.5, 3.5 years old and they're still a 4-point, but they're a big buck, they're pushing deer around. I'll consider taking that deer out, especially if it's 3.5 years old and it's still a 4-point. I've done it in the past, and then all of a sudden I start having some nicer, at least looking bucks show up, some 8 points, 9 points, 10 points that I'm really wanting to shoot and put on the wall. Is that coincidence? Maybe. Hard to know. You can have a bunch of debate on that topic, but I'm not scared to take a deer out, because that deer is going to compete. That's what they're out there doing. They're eating the food, but, even on a night permit standpoint, if these guys, they can kind of be your best friend if they're taking does out for you, because the less does there are on the landscape, the more the bucks have to travel to find a hot doe. So therefore, there's probably more movement during daylight, giving you a better chance to shoot that big buck.
So while we're talking about that, we're talking about shooting does, and there's the age old, not necessarily debate, but concern of I'm not going to shoot anything I'm not gonna eat. Mm-hmm. So I do want to point out the Georgia Department of Ag has worked with Extension and the USDA and several other locations to get a large amount of funding to go in for Hunters for the Hungry. So here in Emmanuel County, we actually have 3 different processing plants that will take deer. Now, you can't just run up there and unload 10 or 15 deer with them. But they will, if you call them ahead of time, they have the space and capacity to take some of the does that you're not interested in keeping. So from an ag agent standpoint, I want you guys to remember that our farmers, that is hands down, we have cotton jasset, we have army worms, we have velvet bean caterpillars, we have kudzu bugs, we have all of these bugs and disease, so weeds that are problematic in our crops. But I know with the data we've collected, hands down, deer are the biggest predator of our crops in the state of Georgia. And so it's a systematic thing. If you want big bucks, you want things like that, really help your farmers kind of hone in on managing some of that and killing some of those deer.
And because we have the tools, that is something that holds a lot of people back, is they don't want to shoot something they're not going to eat. That's what we're taught since we're kids. But now we have an option. We've had the option, but now it's been expanded. You really don't have many excuses to not shoot does while you're hunting.
At least your legal limit, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And even if you weren't close to a processor, you post on Facebook these days, hey, I can shoot a couple of deer if anybody would want to speak for them beforehand. Generally speaking, I think you probably have more responses than tags.
Well, and a lot of times, now with the industry like it is, groceries are expensive. Of course, if you have a deer processed, you're looking at $100, but you're also looking at 30 or 40 packs of hamburger and several packs of cubed, if that's what that's the standard processing thing. So I mean, you're looking at it being a look, maybe not from the hunter standpoint, but from somebody that's going to pay for the processing and just want a deer, you're looking at a cheaper option for protein just in your diet.
And it's good, clean protein. I mean, very lean, very good. I love deer burgers. I mean, I about eat them more than a regular hamburger. When you get the processor that mixes the right amount of fat in it, they're not that hard to manage. They don't fall apart that bad.
Go ahead.
No, you can.
And the other thing is, I hear a lot of people, I just don't like the gamey taste. Well, that also depends on the deer that you are consuming. So if you shoot a 8-point buck and he's in rut, he's probably going to taste pretty gamey. But if you're killing a doe later in the season, they're not usually quite as gamey.
Yeah, and that's if you're trying to manage for big bucks but also still fill your freezer, it's hard to pass up on those does. They're just so good, and their back strap's good. While it might not be as big as a big buck, it's still plenty, and everybody likes to pull the trigger. Okay, well, if you're going to shoot one spike or 8-point, you get to pull the trigger once. You can shoot 2 or 3 does, you get to pull the trigger more often.
That's the thing. We a lot of times when we're still hunting, of course you all know that I'm a big dog hunter too, but when we're still hunting, I'm not killing one. It's just that simple. I'm not taking one to the processor. I'm taking usually 2 or 3. And then so me and my daddy and my baby sister will all be in stands, and a lot of times we're taking 4 and 5 because when one of the first one shoots, we're gonna all start shooting. So it's pretty interesting because we're a good half a mile to a mile through the woods away from each other, and we'll be texting in the stand, and you can hear us when I'm pulling the trigger, and not too long after that, somebody else pulls it.
Yeah. So. Yeah, because it's a process. It takes a lot of effort to drag a deer out and get it to the processor, and if you don't do it yourself sometimes, and there's plenty of times you're slipping out to the stand, just you only have time to deal with it if you shoot a big buck, but there's plenty of Saturdays and Sundays and to shoot all the does you want. We have a long season in Georgia, and some counties even longer, and there's a lot of opportunity to take the does that need to be taken off the landscape and to manage your deer herd. I mean, there's only a certain amount of food, carrying capacity of the land. If your does are skewed, there's not going to be as much food out there available for the herd as a whole.
Well, one more thing I'm just going to point out is I get a lot of questions a lot of times about planting things like crab apples and acorns, oak trees, things like that for deer. I do want to point out from an extension standpoint, a lot of the 4-H programs in this area have plant sales every year, and a lot of times we offer things like pomegranates, things like oak trees that may be a benefit to planting near your deer stand.
Yeah, I think, and unfortunately, with Michael and Helene, there's a lot of the state that's lost a lot of hardwood trees, a lot of oak trees that are beneficial to all types of wildlife, but especially deer and turkeys. And so, as a hunter, we're going to have to start probably. There's going to have to be a push for that, because I think we'll see some detriment to our herds and our flocks.
I think we already have with the pine farming. Not that that's an issue. I think it's just altered the game of food competition, which is why we likely see as much deer consumption of our crops. I think that's just looking at what I see, not necessarily data related, but we, when I was growing up, we had a lot more hardwood stands than we do now. So,
and the hurricane, I hunted. I mean, one of my favorite spots was a beautiful oak wood bottom, and it's wiped out. I mean, 99% of the trees that were in there are on the ground and of no use. And now it might, over the years it'll grow back up, but it might not be in our lifetime.
That's right.
So,
and I did mention that about our 4-H plant sales, but those usually start in the fall, November, December, maybe January, and most of the time pickup is February to April. So it's perfect time to get those planted. Biggest thing would be able to at least water them here and there, but you could certainly get a few to plant in your area just for deer.
Yeah, and now's the time to do it, because the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. So if you don't do it today, you're going to be saying that for a long time.
That's
right. It's important to get those food sources out there that aren't just food plots. Food plots you want to keep in mind as a supplemental thing, but planting some of you could consider them perennial options with acorns or oak trees, red and white oaks, sawtooth oaks, your crab apples, your pears, a bunch of different types of trees. And then also prescribed fire is another way to get a lot of food on the landscape and a lot of cover that benefits turkey and deer and quail.
Well, and deer eat year round. So if you're wanting big bucks, if that's your goal, you have to feed them year round, because they're going to go wherever that food's at.
Mm-hmm.
And it may not be your place.
Yep, that is true. And, I know we mentioned some herbicide options earlier, and, we talked about glyphosate for burn down, and anytime talking about herbicides, you want to, the label is the law, and you want to follow the PPE requirements on the label. And Mississippi State and Tennessee and Georgia has some good resources for food plot herbicide options. But for food plots in the fall, the main one you need to know is glyphosate, and it's usually going to be a 41% solution. It's generally pretty rainproof pretty quickly. And we talked about using it in the backpack sprayer and the boom sprayer. But then there's some options, when you're planting the mixes, you limit yourself on herbicide options. But if you're doing, a single plant species, there are a couple other general herbicides that food plot managers know about, clethodim and sethoxanil. It's used for grass control, especially in your clovers and your brassicas. 2,4-D is a broadleaf control generally used in cereal grains. You have 2,4-D, that's an option in clover and alfalfa, even though we don't grow a lot of alfalfa in Georgia. And then there's a couple other options, but for the most part, the everyday guy that's planting fall food plots, they just need to know glyphosate.
Yeah. And the prescribed burn certainly helps to kind of minimize some of that weed pressure going into it too.
Mm-hmm. And there's mechanical options as well. If you're growing a perennial clover, you can, suppress some of that weed pressure by mowing every so often. There's a few mechanical options as well if you don't want to mess with herbicides.
So anything else pertinent to?
No, I think we covered just about everything you could talk about and need to know for the most part on getting a fall food plot up and going, and where you need to put it. We talked about site selection, access.
One thing we didn't talk about was water availability in that area, and that may be a good thing to consider too.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on how many acres you're hunting. So if I'm hunting 5 acres and I don't necessarily need the water to be right there by me, but if I'm hunting 10,000 acres, I don't want to be, 5,000 away from the water source. So
yeah, and that's something, from a hunting perspective, we might want to consider more than we usually do this year is, water access for the deer, and to take advantage of that, because it's definitely, the water reserves are depleted, and that might be something, especially if you can have water, food, and cover all in once and easy access. You might have yourself a little gold mine there. Generally, you want these food plots to be somewhere, you're going to catch deer moving, near bedding areas and travel and different habitat types that mix together. But sometimes, like we were talking about earlier, You just have to go with what you got, but you can only hunt it on certain winds. And water is definitely going to be a thing this year.
That's right. All righty. Well, anything else?
I don't think so. I think we covered most anything.
All right, guys. Thank y'all for joining us. We're going to roll into Blake. He's got some upcoming events and some other things for you. Do want to remind you guys to be safe while you're hunting. Obviously my daddy's favorite saying when I got hurt growing up or something like that is, you'll live to hunt again. So we certainly want everybody to live to hunt again. So please be safe out there. Remember how dangerous hunting actually can be. Wear your orange. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine growing up in the dog hunter world. It's a pet peeve of mine when I start seeing still hunters not wearing their orange in their pictures and things like that. So that's the biggest one. Obviously, gun management, things like that. But y'all be safe out there. Thank y'all.
Thanks, Savannah. I really appreciate you taking the lead here and getting with Scout and having a really great opportunity to meet. I'm sorry I couldn't be a part of that conversation. I was been moving and doing a lot of personal life changes, big changes, good changes, but all took me out of the office a little bit the last couple of weeks. So I did want to close us out with some upcoming events that are coming up throughout the district and the state. The first one I wanted to mention is the Midville Field Day. And if y'all have been a listener of the podcast, you know we've talked on this event almost every year. This year it is on August the 12th. It is a great time. If y'all don't know what it is or have never heard of it before, please go back. We have 2 episodes. One of them is with Anthony Black, the leader of the Midville Education Center, the Southeast Research and Education Center in Midville, Georgia. And then we also had another episode with 2 local farmers from Screven County that they talked about the importance of Midville, the importance of extension, and their experience with the field day and how great it is. So give those 2 a listen. And if you're around next on August the 12th, please come to Midville's field day. It's a great chance to see all the cool innovation and research that's going on in our part of the state. Another cool thing that's coming up is Lawrence County Extension is putting on a 4-part homesteading series. So if you know anybody that's homesteading or wants to get into that or interested, our first workshop is going to be August the 13th in Dublin. We're working on this project alongside the Tift and Irwin County offices in Ben Hill. They will have a workshop as well on the 18th. Those are our first workshops in the 4-part series this year. So please go to our Facebook to find out some more information. There'll be some more information on our Killing It Like It Is blog as well. So please look at those. Please join us for that. We're offering a youth and an adult component to this workshop. So if you have some youth ages 4th grade through 12th, please let them know that this is an opportunity and it's free of charge for the youth. The adult side, all 4 sessions for $20, or each session has its own cost associated. Space is limited. We have 20 spots available for the adults in each class. So it's first come, first serve. So please try to get registered as quick as possible. Give us a call if you want to register or need some more information, or find more information on Facebook and the blog. The other upcoming events I wanted to mention that we have coming up is the Georgia Forage Conference, September the 17th in Tifton, Georgia. It's a great opportunity to come see what's going on down there, what's going on in the forage world. We will be having hopefully another forage episode here in the next coming weeks, so stay tuned for that because we have some big changes happening and some things going on in the hay world that we need to get some information out towards. As far as anything else, I think that's all for the near future. We do have a combine clinic in the works, and it should be on the 18th of August. August 18th. It'll probably be in either Emanuel or Telfair County. Or not Telfair, sorry, Trutland County. So Emanuel or Trutland County. More information about that will be also on our blog, our Facebook, and will be sent out at your local county extension offices. If you're in the area and would like to attend that combine clinic, just give your local county extension office a call, and they'll get you some more information. In the meantime, I hope y'all all have a great beginning to the harvest. I know some people have already started harvesting corn, so I hope everything's going well. Have a good harvest, have good weather for it. And until next time, just keep tilling it like it is. Thank you so much.
Heard a farmer say while baling hay, I need a little help to make it through this droughty day. So he called the county agent line and asked, what's the word on fertilizer prices this time? From the small towns to the fields we roam, we keep producers growing strong close to home. We're tilling it like it is, where research meets the county biz. For leadership to market trends, to how to talk to bankers and make new friends. Yeah, we're tilling it like it is, bringing knowledge through the rifts. If it helps your farm, your school, or your kids, you'll hear it here, no politics. We're just telling it like it is.